Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Future is Bilingual podcast. My name is Heather. Welcome back. This episode is one that I have been thinking about for a very long time, and I mean a very long time. It's based off of a talk that I did at Women in Language Conference 2021. Yes, that's 4 years ago, March, 4 years ago. And it's something that I have been wanting to put on the podcast, and I don't know why I didn't. The talk I gave, I had a presentation, like a PowerPoint, in English and French, and then I gave the talk in French. So that was kind of a nice, fun little event for me because, of course, Women in Language is all about celebrating women who speak and work and do things in different languages. So, as a native English speaker, I find it kind of boring because many people give their talks in English, hoping to reach a broader audience. So I purposefully gave my talk in French and put English on my slides. And anyway, long story short, here we are. It's April 2025, more than 4 years later, and I'm finally going to record an episode about this for the podcast. So, yalla bismillah, let's do this. The original talk that I gave was titled, Can I Do This? And it's talking about challenges and solutions for non-native parents, but I want to open it up and be much more broad today, just about some struggles that you might find, things that might be, making you question yourself or setting you back, and things that you might just be struggling with internally, externally, in all senses of the word. I actually have an episode, a very old episode, about challenges and solutions, but that episode I think was published in 2020, so before I gave this talk. In any case, let's jump right in because there are many things to say on this topic. And I myself know, as a parent whose children are now 6 and 7, soon to be 8, uh, you know, challenges and struggles and all sorts of things come up when you are raising children, point blank. And when you throw different languages into the mix and different cultural things and all these aspects of parenting multilingual children, things get even more complicated. And then, your whole family dynamic, who speaks which language, which family members do or don't understand. And yeah, things can get pretty challenging. So, one thing that you might be kind of afraid of, I just want to hit this one right off the bat and get it out of the way, because many people have this misconception that speaking to your child in more than one language will cause linguistic developmental delays, and that is just not true. And many studies have proven this. My own two children did not have a delayed speech, even though they were raised with Polish at home and English outside with my family and people outside, being raised in America with Polish at home. There's just so much evidence, if you actually look into the science, that it's not true. And a child who is going to have a linguistic delay, it's going to happen whether that child is exposed to one, two, three, or more languages. And of course, we see this because there are many monolingual children who experience a language developmental delay. And it's not because they're exposed to another language, it's just because this child needs more time for whatever reason, right? Some kids walk faster, some kids talk faster, some kids, they need more time. And some kids do it faster, some kids do it slower. And there's nothing wrong or right about it. Although, of course, as a parent, you start to worry. You wonder if you did something. And yeah, but it is not true. That is a complete myth. And unfortunately, it is being repeated even by like professionals like doctors. And it's just a very unfortunate reality that people are still repeating that myth. It is not true. There are, the norm across the world, across the globe, is people being exposed to more than one language. So if you kind of get out of this monolinguistic sense that we have of this being normalcy, it's not. Actually, being plurilingual, being exposed to many different languages and dialects is actually the norm for more people in the world than is monolingualism. But anyway, that's the first thing that I hope you do not let stop you, because you will not cause delays in your child. Will you cause confusion? Yeah, maybe. I mean, any person who's learning more than one language maybe gets confused. Like, is that exactly the same term? Is that not the exact same term? Maybe they forget. Like my kids kind of don't know sometimes how to translate something like very cultural, like they eat rosu, which is like a chicken soup, but they call it rosu. They don't call it anything else. And then they try to explain it to somebody else. Again, that's an easy example, but there are things that, you know, sometimes might cause a confusion or just a difference, and then they notice it and it's fine, right? But that's not a linguistic delay per se. Another thing that sometimes parents fear, and I 100% understand this, but that they fear that their child will not be able to make friends if they do not speak the same language as the community, right? So we raised our children in Polish at home. And if we had let that fear stop us, right, and we only spoke English to the children, then they still would have made friends. And I have seen this because we moved our family to Canada, where the majority language was French. We were living in Quebec. Children, honestly, don't really need much language to play and to have fun. Have you ever seen children play? I'm talking like, toddler, preschool, school age kids. Sometimes my kids are playing, they don't even know what the kids' names are, even though they've been playing for 1 hour because they don't talk. They run and they play tag and they scream things and they hide, they do all sorts of things, but they're not really needing the language that much to talk. So yeah, I feel that this fear really is just, it's a normal thing for parents to worry about. All parents want their children to fit in and to make friends, but you can 100% raise your children in the language that you want. That's not the community language, and they will have a fine time integrating in and making friends, whether it's at daycare or just at the park. And I mean, they will make friends. They will pick up language that they need at the right moment when they need it, right? So don't let that small fear like stop you completely from raising your kids in another language. Okay, and just on that same note, you can also use a method called TNP, which stands for time and place. And then you can choose to use, for example, the majority language, the community language, while you are at the park. Okay, as long as you speak that language, right? But you can choose to use that in certain locations. So if you go to pick your child up from daycare, maybe you only speak the community language there. And then your child, of course, is getting exposure at that place as well. And that's a personal choice. So I think you have to look at your entire plan. You have to look at how many hours a day your child is hearing your language, the language you want to teach them, versus the community language to see if that's a good fit. I know when my kids were in daycare, they were getting so much English that I always would stick to Polish just to balance it out. I didn't want to like not give in, but like I didn't want to automatically just use English because that would be lost time. This is my teacher brain, lost time that they weren't hearing Polish. So I always was aiming for like the most amount of time they can hear Polish, the better, right? And again, there's many different methods of raising children. I have episodes and posts about that on Instagram. So I won't bore you with those facts here, but time and place is one that many parents find works well, and they choose specific places. I mean, we did this, even though I'm saying we did Polish at home, we did English when we were with my family because my side of the family doesn't speak Polish, right? So time and place was working for us there, where English was the language with my side of the family, and when they were with their dads, it was Polish. All right, number three is a big one. And this is when you, the speaker, right, of this language, say you want to teach your children Spanish or Japanese or whatever language it is, if you don't speak that language fluently or fluently yet, maybe you're going to let that fear stop you. And so this talk I mentioned was given for parents like the non-native parents. And that's actually more common than you might think. The parent who's not the native speaker of the language. So yeah, you do not have to speak a language fluently, whatever fluently means. And you can listen to episode 7, it's an old one, about what does it mean to speak fluently. But that is like, there's no special bar that you've suddenly reached. There's no like level you reach. There's no end really when you like say I speak fluently. Like, what does that mean? So, this is just more of like a self-doubt that you have in your head, like, well, I'm not good enough yet. Okay, but can you give them something in that language, right? It doesn't have to be you're 24/7, you're always speaking that language, but can you give them something? Because something is better than nothing. That's always my viewpoint, right? Better late than never. Something is better than nothing. Your child is going to pick up something, and you can keep pushing and learning together, improving with them. This also depends on your family dynamic. Do you have another speaker in the house that's going to kind of help both of you or all of you, depending on how many are in your family? Again, this really depends on your family dynamic, but here I'm talking about the fear, right? The fear, the self-doubt that's kind of stopping you, which is, oh, I'm not good enough yet. I don't speak fluently yet, right? And there's many parts about this, and I want to get into them, right? For example, maybe you have some fear or doubts about your accent, your pronunciation. And first of all, first things first, we all have an accent. Okay, you're listening to me. I'm a native speaker of English from the Northeast US. I speak very differently than somebody who was raised in the UK, and very differently from someone who's raised in South Africa, in Australia, in any part of the world that also speaks English, right? There's no correct accent to have, right? Even with a small country, Poland, it's the only country that speaks Polish. There are many accents inside of that one country. So there's not like one golden standard we all have to have for an accent. And I mean, I understand this, of course. Like made this talk, I gave this talk at the Women in Language Conference because I am the non-native speaker for my children. And I don't have perfect pronunciation, but I try. And I think, you have to just look at the options. Like, do I speak with them and give them at least the Polish language? Or do I just not speak with them and stick to what I'm used to because I'm afraid my accent's not perfect? Like, which is the better option here, right? For me, I'm very motivated, dedicated to this multilingualism, raising my children with a broader sense of language than just my one language, right? My native language of English. And I think there's other ways you can go about this. Of course, we're still going to have doubts, myself included, but you are not the only source, right? Hopefully, you have other people in your lives that can speak to your children in that language. Okay, maybe you don't, right? I have an episode with my friend Mackenzie. She's the only French speaker speaking to her children. So she's going and finding other resources, whether that's songs, TV shows, friends, or someone she can call on, right, from another part of the world who speak that language. She's going to a summer camp where the kids are immersed in that language. My kids are going to Polish Saturday school where all of the teachers are native Polish speakers. There's many ways that you can try to like create that community. Of course, live in person is amazing. You cannot get better than like in, face-to-face interaction, but still listening to a TV, right? Listening to a show. There's many ways for your child to hear a quote unquote native, right, accent, and not just from you. So yes, this is a real fear. Yes, our pronunciation is not always the best, right? Our accent is not quote unquote native, but that should not stop you if you want to give your child this language, right? And even like a base knowledge of this language is better than nothing, right? Even a little bit of knowledge, that curiosity, that interest, like, oh, mommy says this weird word. Like, what is this, right? It's different than what I'm used to hearing. That's going to grow inside them, this curiosity, right? We're planting seeds, as one of my previous guests had mentioned. So I think it's just a really beautiful metaphor. And she's also into the whole ecology. And, if you listen to that episode, that's her bread and butter. But I think it is a really beautiful analogy that we can instill this, into our kids young and it'll grow. We don't even know. I always say that, like, I don't know what languages my kids will speak later. Inshallah, they're going to speak more than just Polish and English, but we will see. All right. On the same vein of your accent not being perfect is maybe your grammar is not perfect. You don't always speak correctly. That is in quotes because what does that even mean? That's, up for debate. But as someone who speaks to my kids, in Polish, and I admit I speak to them in Polish and English a lot more now. But yes, my grammar is not perfect. I have admitted that since the beginning. And Polish is particularly challenging with grammar, as anyone who studied a Slavic language knows, or if you've studied Latin, German, different languages that have cases, it is particularly just challenging with grammar because every time you use a word in a sentence, the ending changes depending on how you're using it. Um, I will not give you examples, but unless you are curious. Um, so, for example, if I'm saying that I am, the word for store versus going to the store is different. It's another ending. And being inside the store is different. If I want to say there is no store or there are no stores, those are all going to be different endings on the base word sklep, which is store. So sklepu, sklepie, sklepów, sklepu, like there's just many different forms of the word. So for us as English speakers or speakers of a Romance language where you just kind of put words in, the same kind of grammar structure as English, it's challenging. I remember myself not finishing sentences because I was like, I don't know the ending. Like I would just kind of be like, sklep, what's the rest of that ending? I know it's different, but I don't know what it is. So yes, grammar, it's so challenging and most of us hate it. I myself am a grammar nerd. I'm a language teacher, language lover. I love grammar. I absolutely love it. I think it's, very mathematical and very logical when you understand the rules. But huge caveat, I understand many people do not. They loathe it. They don't want to think about it. They feel not comfortable, right? If this is their non-native language, or, maybe it's a language they grew up with that they haven't really spoken in a long time, right? Like a heritage language. There's many situations where you're not always feeling like 100%. Maybe you're overthinking it as a learner, as a heritage speaker. There's, different reasons why you would be not 100% on the grammar knowledge, but please don't let that stop you. Okay? Because even when people speak, let's say in quotes incorrectly, right? Children are hearing many examples. And even if they say it wrong, I tell this to my very beginner English students. I mentioned previously that my job now is to teach newly arrived immigrants. And I mean, I always say your communication is so much more important than if your grammar is, perfect. Because if you and I can get the point across to each other, whether you've put the verb in the right tense or you added the S for the plural or what, like we can discuss that if there's like a confusion, but you communicating is so much more valuable than perfect grammar. And so much communication can happen, so much connection can happen despite grammar being, totally a little bit flawed. And that will be like something that they can work on over time, right? And I mean, as ourselves, as language learners, we can work on improving our grammar little by little, right? And I honestly found practicing, like speaking to my children, was such good practice that my Polish got better, right? It was like not that great when my kids were babies, and I was using it, of course, daily, all the time, speaking to my kids, and it got so much better. So I think that's just something that will come with time. It's not something you need to worry about or let it stop you. Because if I said, well, no, my Polish isn't good, so I'm not going to speak Polish, my Polish would be just as bad as it was, 7, 8 years ago. And it would never have improved because I wouldn't have pushed myself and I wouldn't have given my children this gift of bilingualism, since birth. And I think this is just something that we have. All of us have these fears. All of us have these doubts, whether it's not all of them, but we all have some doubts. We all have some fears about if we're doing things correctly. I just want to say, because I think I forgot to mention at the beginning of the episode, but huge caveat. But yeah, this is really important that this topic that I'm going and rambling about is also not just for the bilingual parent, but for anybody who's learning a language. Like, don't let your fear of your accent stop you. Don't let your fear of your lack of grammar knowledge stop you. This is for someone who's trying to speak to a child, but also just the average learner who's trying to speak to people, right? Like, if I let that stop me, I will never practice. I will be thinking so much in my head and never get the words out. And I mean, I 100% overthink, and I do this all the time in my lessons. And you just have to keep trying, keep trying. All right. So we spoke about, you know, your knowledge of language is not fluent enough. So your accent, maybe your grammar, maybe, or maybe it's your vocabulary, right? Maybe you're someone who studied, let's say you're a non-native English speaker and you studied English and English grammar for a long time going through school and you really know it, but maybe it's your vocab that's, lacking. So again, this is something that you just kind of have to like jump in, and it's amazing how much you will pick up like day to day to day if you just keep at it and if you're using it. And I mean, even with myself, with my students, I try to be very practical. Like, what vocabulary do I need? Right? I've been taking Arabic classes with a teacher from Natikalam, and we were doing a lot of grammar, we were doing a lot of things, and it was great stuff, songs, videos, and I was like, I told her, I was like, I need, after all these sessions, like, I need household words. I need, like, how do I talk about, like, clothes or washing dishes? Like, I need just the stuff I do every day. Like, all of these videos were amazing and they were, like, above my level. But I really just need what is, like, practical. And same, I brought kitchen utensils into my classroom the other day. And, I did that with my Polish students as well. I think this is something that doesn't get touched upon enough, like the everyday practical. So if I need to talk about, what are the items I touch every day? It's a glass, it's a computer, it's, like my glasses, my just all those things, right? My phone, like we need to know these words, and you can build your vocabulary very quickly if it's like things you're repeating, right? Because it's useful. If the vocab is not useful, you will hear it and forget it, right? But for example, like my Arabic teacher today was teaching me like pillow and blanket, lamp, like all these things that like of course like they're in the house. I look at them 100 times a day without even realizing it, right? So if every time I look at it, I can think about it, right? And I can kind of keep repeating it to myself. Thinking in the language is super important, whether you're, you know, trying to get more fluent or you're trying to learn a language. You really have to like switch your brain to look at the thing and be like, okay, I know that word. Of course, I can see that it's a pen, but in my brain, I also have to think alam, kalam, right? Pen in Arabic, so that I'm constantly like refreshing my vocab. And that's how you kind of build and make it automatic. All right, that was a little bit of a tangent, but we have covered all of the categories that fall under like my language is not good enough. Okay, one last thing I forgot to mention with vocab. So I'm saying you need to be thinking and you need to, learn it as you go. But if you have little kids, to go back to the parenting situation, little kids love repeating and they will repeat and repeat and repeat. And that's how songs are as well. They're very repetitive. So use this natural repetition with yourself, right? With your kids to kind of drill these things into you. Honestly, it's one of the best ways to learn. Like a song that's just like so repetitive, right? It'll get stuck in your head. You'll learn it so well. But again, you can do that. You can make it like a funny game. You can like make my kids, they love making up like little songs with things now. Rhyming as your kids get older, right? They understand rhyming, they understand syllables. There's many ways you can take something that seems kind of boring, like, learning vocabulary, but make it fun, right? There's many games you can play. Just to name a few games that I like to play with my kids, my students. You can do, rhyming games. That's kind of classic. You can do, name a different word with each letter of the alphabet. You can do like I give you a word, like for example, an adjective, and you have to give me words that match that, right? Like so if I say big, you have to say things that are big, right? Like airplane, elephant, whatever, ocean. There's all sorts of like just fun games. I Spy, there's all the classics. But make that vocab building, kind of fun. And there's ways to do that. And inshallah, I will publish a blog post about those games because it's also something I share with I have a group of volunteers at work who are teaching English as volunteers, and I give every month, giving them like a little talk, like a workshop slash meeting. And that's something that we just did recently. Games that you don't need any prep for, that you can just kind of jump right in and get the students to talk. So same thing, right, with our kids, right? We want them to make, and make it enjoyable for them to have fun, but also be using the language. Okay, so moving on, the seventh thing that might cause you some fear and anxiety is that you are the only person who speaks this language in your community. And I mean, that is a huge responsibility. I'm not going to lie. That is not my case. And I really applaud people like my friend Mackenzie, who she's speaking French with her children, and nobody else in her family or her husband's family speaks French. Like that is something she took on her own. And you can listen to her episode. That's one of the most listened to episodes of the podcast about, I think it's called What It Takes to Raise Bilingual Kids. But yes, that is just, it's a really big responsibility. I'm not going to lie. But that does not mean it's not attainable. And you really have to have a strong, willpower to do that and a strong mindset. And yeah, you will be the one, you know, talking a lot and giving your child that input. So there needs to be that relationship there, right? You need to have the time. So that's also another factor is how much time do you spend with your child each day? How much input are they getting? And then, of course, no one should be doing this on their own. Raising children takes a village. So whatever means you can to get other people involved, whether that is just some favorite, YouTuber who speaks that language for them to like watch some cartoon, whatever it is, right? If you can get other people in your community, kind of build a community where your kids have other sources of the language. You don't have to do it alone. There are 100% other people who, are doing the same thing. And maybe with the beauty of the internet, you can share, even if it's a smaller language, you can, inshallah, find someone, right? Post about it and find someone else who's raising their kids in that language. Some of the bigger languages, I know Spanish, like people have been able to create even little groups about that, like a Spanish play date once a week. So my friend who speaks French, yeah, she could probably easily find something with French. And I think you just have to maybe be the trendsetter, maybe be the one who takes the bull by the horns and starts that movement. And maybe there will be other people, inshallah, who will follow in your footsteps. But yes, it definitely is something, it's a scary kind of big step that you're taking. So you really have to be committed, but it's definitely doable. And again, there are schools, there are resources online, there are plenty of things you can do. And, don't forget your kids don't really need that much. They need a connection to their parent. And if you are talking to your child, if you feel comfortable talking to them in that language and building that connection, that is really all it takes. You might be, seeing ads for all sorts of things you need to buy and get in order for this to happen, but no. The thing that will teach a child a language is connection with a person who speaks that language and commitment to stay in that language, right? Because it is very easy when your child knows you speak another language, like the majority language, to switch. So being very committed, being very intentional, staying your track, it's definitely possible. So I applaud you all for doing that when you are the only person. That is not an easy task, but it is a doable one. So keep going. Okay, this is a tough one. If you are, facing a struggle where, for example, number 8 is your partner or your family at large maybe don't want you to speak that other language because they don't understand it. That's a really tough one because you don't want to create feelings of isolation among, other members of the family. You don't want to create that dissonance within the family. So I think that's something you have to talk about with the other adults, right? Whether it's your partner, if it's, grandma, if it's whoever is not feeling, like they are part of this conversation. Yeah, it can be a bit awkward. And I'm not going to lie, that does happen. It happened with our family where my daughter was born the year before the pandemic. So when she was like 1 years old, the pandemic started, and then all of her language was blooming, that whole year of isolation. And so she only spoke Polish. And my mother did feel like, I don't know what my granddaughter's saying. I can't understand a word she says. Those were some things I heard. And you feel guilty, I definitely felt like I'm I'm sorry, but at the same time, like that's the choice we've made. We know how important it is for her to know this language because English will eventually take over, which big surprise it has. She's now in school in a kindergarten. Um, but yes, you might get pushback from family. And I think there are some solutions you can think about. Like, for example, you maybe want to restrict speaking to the child in the language just when you're alone with them to not make your family feel isolated or confused or like you're talking about them or any, bad feelings. Um, of course, you can explain the advantages of being bilingual. Um, Try to, talk with your family about why you're doing this because maybe your family members don't understand or your partner doesn't understand. But yes, definitely you want to make sure you show that you've heard them, that you respect their feelings, and that you're gonna come to a compromise because it can get just, we don't want to cause any, like I said, dissonance or any hurt feelings or any just tension in the house if you are so like 100% gung ho of speaking this language, right? Like my partner's like, I'm going to speak Chinese. And I'm like, I don't understand anything about what you're saying. I don't understand a word of Chinese besides like hello and thank you, right? That I'm not going to feel very comfortable. And you don't want to make someone feel uncomfortable in their own house, right? So kind of setting some ground rules there. When can we do it? Can you teach me along with them? So I think that is a conversation that has to happen between the people, right? And especially if it's the partner because you are living with them 24/7. So please be respectful and try to understand their point of view, but also don't let them just kind of, trample and like get your, like, oh, well, I guess we're not speaking Chinese in the house now because no, you can still speak Chinese to your child. Just find the right time. All right. So number nine, maybe you don't have enough resources. Yeah, this can happen, and especially with some languages more than others. But here is where community will come in. You can ask others. You can, try searching not just your local library, maybe some, the library of the capital. Maybe they can send it. I know our states have like a system where they can send books if you request them throughout the entire state. You can do some more deep diving on the internet because the internet has so many things. But yeah, I think asking others, joining groups, there's a lot of Facebook groups, there's a lot of people to follow on the internet. But you don't have to create everything yourself. I think that's an important point to make because people might think like, I can't do it, I don't have the resources, um, and just kind of give up, like this is excuse, and then they just walk away from there. Um, there you can create your own resources, although I 100% realize that takes a lot of effort and time and just, yeah, you maybe don't want to do that as a busy parent. I myself don't want to do that. And I am a language teacher. And yeah, that's just like way too much effort on anyone's part. But it's out there. Some of us maybe have that creativity in us. We want to create resources. Amazing. Do it. And you know what? Then put it on the internet for other people to share and to benefit from because that is going to create so much more. And just, many people are creating and sharing. And I think that's a great thing to do, whether you ask for money or not, right? There's teachers pay teachers, there's websites, there's things you can create. But my last note on this one about resources is that I already mentioned this, but kids don't need a lot. They really don't need a lot to learn. Like you don't need books and flashcards and like all sorts of like vocab cards. You don't need that. They really don't. Does it help? Yeah, I mean some kids learn to read faster because their parents gave them flashcards. Okay, but you don't need to have all these resources for your children to learn. You need to be connected. You need to spend time with them, quality time. You need to be singing and talking to them. That's what kids need. Kids need connection. Kids need someone taking care of them, right? Feeding them, clothing them, talking them through their day. They don't need a whole lot of stuff, right? Like any small thing can be a game, right? I could play a game with a simple pen. And my kids actually did. They had a game that they played with pencil and glove. They created an entire world of this pencil and this glove. This whole saga ensued. But yeah, you don't need a lot of things. So try to not get too bogged down or too, what's the word? too overwhelmed or too like comparing yourself to other maybe like homeschool moms you see on the internet. Try not to do that because your children will learn with communication, right? We're talking about a language here. We're not talking about, a different skill like writing. We're talking about speaking, which you don't really need that much for. All right. This is a big one, and this is kind of can come from anywhere, but if people, doubt you or question you, like you're at the grocery store speaking to your kids and someone asks you, like, what language are you speaking? Like, what? Why are you doing that? We're in America. Um, just kind of be ready, especially if you are planning to speak out in public, like I did. And I did not find too much backlash, but I know some people have different experiences. So just be prepared. People are going to be curious, maybe hostile. So just, have some knowledge ready about like there's a lot of advantages to bilingualism. I'm allowed to speak any language I want. These are my own children, right? I'm not speaking to you. You don't have to say it in a rude manner, but be confident, right? Be very like matter of fact, confident, and like you don't need to engage any more than that unless you want to, right? If someone's like genuinely, like truly very like interested and wants to know more and very like kind and respectful about it, yeah, talk to them, right? Engage them, explain what's happening, right? Somebody was asking me once, like, is that Russian? It's like, oh no, it's Polish. Like, oh yeah, they're kind of similar. Yes, they are. There's a lot of similarities. We had a nice discussion, right? But it depends on how that person approaches you. And that's also going to happen based on, your own decision when you're speaking it, like that time and place. But just be ready because even like the best of friends, even the closest people to you, your parents, they might question you, right? And this can happen for anything, whether you're like picking up a new language and people are like, why are you learning Tajik? You're like, because I want to. You don't really have to like explain yourself to people, but just, be be confident. I think that's the most important. Just tell them this is what I'm doing and be confident in your decision. And you don't need to change yourself for anybody else. Okay. If you're struggling with the confidence, we mentioned this a little bit when we talked about the language maybe not being up to your standard of what you think it should be. But really, I mean, no one is perfect, and you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be doing this 100% of the time, right? Like, you don't have to have the perfect notes if you're learning a new language and be Instagrammable and amazing. You do not have to speak to your child 100% of the time in the target language to be passing them another language on to them. And you can, start today. You don't have to wait for some perfect magical moment when you will be fluent to start. No, just start where you are and know that you will improve every day. And if some days look messier and not as great as the others, that's okay, right? Just get back on that horse, right? If you fall off, it's okay. Get back on. I think one of the most important things when we are feeling not so confident is to have a community and to have people you can turn to, whether that's your partner, whether that's, listening to a podcast. Like I hope this podcast can be, a little bit of a support, finding a group on Facebook, having people that you can turn to because there are going to be days where you're like, what am I doing? Is my child even learning? I haven't seen progress. They only want to speak English. There's definitely days where you're thinking like, should I just give up? But be confident, be resilient. Don't just let those negative thoughts seep in. And try to fake it till you make it, or try to build that confidence, knowing that you are giving your child an amazing gift. If you are learning another language, you are giving yourself an amazing gift, a gift that you don't even realize yet, because every day you're going to learn more. And every day you're going to explore something else. And who knows what the next thing will lead to. I mean, I think about myself. When I started learning French back in middle school, I was like 12 or 13 in sixth grade. I had no idea. French would lead me to Spanish, that would lead me to Polish and Korean and Japanese and Arabic. And I mean, there's like so many languages opened up. I've studied like dabbled in Greek. I've dabbled in, all sorts of like little Haitian Creole here and there on Duolingo. I mean, you never know. So my 12-year-old self had no idea, right? But having a knowledge of French helped me with the others. I forgot to put Italian in there, right? Like you just never know. So don't limit yourself today with something that you want, right? Go for it. Be confident. Try it because you don't know if that decision is gonna, have like a domino effect and impact you for the next thing and the next thing, right? So if you don't start, if you don't have that first domino fall, like nothing else maybe would have happened after that. You don't know, right? I'm looking in hindsight. But kind of just, go for it. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, right? You can always stop, you can always change, you can always pivot. But if you never start, you'll never know. And I think one of the worst things in life is to look back and be like, why didn't I do XYZ 10 years ago? Right? Like, don't put yourself in a situation where your kids are 18 and you wish you had spoken to them in your language. Like, don't let yourself get to a point of regret, right? Like, just do a little bit. At least if you tried and your kids never really latched on and they never learned to speak, but you tried and you instilled a little bit and you got some culture in there and you did the best you could, okay, you know that you tried. But if you never tried, you never pushed that first domino and you just kind of went with it and spoke English because we're in America, and then you come to a moment to regret, yeah, you don't want to, you know, don't want to get to that point if this is something that matters. If this is not something that matters, well, you're probably not listening to this podcast. But yeah, then it won't be a regret. If it doesn't matter to you, it won't be a regret. But if this is something that matters to you, if you think that language is important, don't let yourself stop yourself, right? Don't get in your own way. Get out of your own way. Help yourself. Okay. I could keep talking about confidence, but we'll keep going. Uh, all right, number 12. This is specifically for our non-native speakers, myself included, is that there can be some prejudice against us. Now, this is non-native for any language, right? I'm a non-native Polish speaker. There's a very famous friend I have on Instagram. She's the non-native English speaker. And yeah, people people have lots of prejudices against being non-native, right? Even that term non-native is like questionable. And I find myself included when I make a mistake in my one of my foreign languages, I will like criticize myself so much more than if I make the similar or same mistake in my own language. Like when I make a mistake in English, I'm just like, whoops, whatever. This is what I meant. Correct myself. It's fine. If I make a mistake in like French, I was doing an interview in French and I was like, oh my God, how did I forget this? And I can't believe I conjugated this wrong. Like, do I even speak French anymore? Right? You just like dramatize so much more because you are not native, right? Whereas like if we make a mistake in our native language, okay, like I'm still a native English speaker, no matter how poorly and badly my English becomes. Um, I'm still a native English speaker, right? You can't take that identity away from me. Now, I'm still a French speaker, but for some reason it seems to be on rockier ground. And I think, yeah, this is again like a confidence thing. All right, so no, you cannot just I want you to know with a K, right? K-N-O-W. Know that you cannot change other people's opinions, right? If people are going to have prejudices, if they're going to think negatively about these, non-native speakers being us, that's fine. The fear of making errors, of course, we talked about this earlier. This is like a very valid fear, but it's not a reason. It's not reason enough to not speak to your language and to deprive them of learning that language that you want to pass on to them. So don't let the, the negativity of others, don't let the negative judgment and the negative thoughts of others, and really the invalid points that they have, because there are non-native speakers of many languages who speak and write so beautifully, and there are native speakers who don't speak as eloquently. So it really is not about nativeness or not nativeness. It's about practice with the language and how much you use it, and like level of study and level of mastery and practice. I mean, there's so many like years. Maybe someone has been speaking this language for many years, even though they're not native, and they speak much more fluently and beautifully and eloquently than maybe someone who was born and spoke it and hasn't used it, right? So It's really, I have a whole another episode about native versus non-native teachers that you can go back and listen to, actually. One of the rare episodes I did both in English and French. So there's a French version of that episode. But yes, please don't let negativity and, stereotypes and prejudices and any negative comments affect you, right? Just keep going. Like, I know those are the loudest, right? You get like a million positive comments and you'll remember the one negative comment that someone said, unfortunately. But yeah, try to ignore it, right? Try to just let it go because you cannot control what other people think or say or do. So just let it go. All right, here's a really big one. And we all face this, myself included, is that I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time to, teach my kid Polish. Well, no, actually, we all have time, but it's where we prioritize our time. You know, like people will say this about many things, about, eating healthy, about going to the gym, about exercising, about, doing their prayer, like whatever the thing is, I don't have time. But really, we all have time and everybody has, you know, their priorities, and you have to set your priorities straight. Now, this reminds me of something that I've heard about routine. People who think, I don't have a morning routine or I don't have an evening routine. Well, actually, everybody does. Even when you don't think you do, there's things that you do that even if it's not like a thought about like pre-set out routine, like for example, myself, I always want to go to bed early and I always end up going to bed late. And I think, oh, I just don't have a good evening routine, but I do have an evening routine of like working and staying on the computer too late. That is a routine. That is something I do consistently, unfortunately. You really have to be so specific and so like sure of something that you want to do, right? Like if I want to get to bed by 10, I need to create this routine like deliberately. That's the word was looking for, deliberate. You need to be deliberate. You need to create the thing. If I want to be asleep by 10, I have to do like XYZ at 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock to be able to be in bed asleep by 10, right? Same with learning a language, right? Whether it's scheduling lessons and, finding a teacher, finding a tutor online and scheduling the lessons, or finding the resources and scheduling time to use them. I am very guilty of this. I have many amazing resources to learn Egyptian Arabic, and I don't schedule myself the time to actually go onto YouTube and watch them or go onto the app and practice them. I have them, but I'm not using them. So this is the same with someone who's trying to teach their child a language. They have that knowledge, right? Like they speak, let's say like Dutch, but if they're not speaking it to their kid, they're not making the priority and not making the time, and they're just kind of going about their routine. Like let's say they use English instead. Okay, now you're not teaching your kid Dutch, right? You have to like force it and be deliberate and put it as like your schedule. So sometimes I have given this example and I would, suggest to people if it seems really like overwhelming to suddenly switch the language you're using, you can start small, right? That's always a good tip is like start small, start with like just at breakfast time or just at dinner time, like some nice, enjoyable time of the day where people aren't usually fighting because they're happy and eating. Um, Whatever time of day, right? In the car ride to school or in the car ride home or whatever. Speak the language and like see how it feels, right? And like make that a routine every day. I did this when I was switching before we moved to Canada. I was trying to put French into our routine. And of course, my kids didn't know a single word of French, and it was like a big change for them. So I just did it like little by little, right? Like at breakfast, I would speak French to them, and they were like, "Why is mommy switching languages?" My son absolutely refused when I first started. He was like, "Yeah, no, no, like I don't want to hear this language." But it was something you have to kind of consistently keep doing it. So yeah, you might get some pushback, um, or even your brain, right? Like I might be like, oh, I don't want to study, but okay, I have to, right? Kind of push through, study because I know there's a reward at the end that if I do this every day for 5 minutes, I will, accumulate 35 minutes a week. That's great. right? Maybe I can push it to 10 minutes a day, and it's going to be more hours a week and all these things, right? So um, just think, really think about your routine. And if you have questions, if you want to talk, I will schedule an individual consultation with people if they want to talk about their language learning routine or their family language plan, their family, dynamic of who speaks what language, who's with the kids at these times. I'm very happy to sit and talk with you if you have questions about that, because I think it is something very tricky, and every family and every, learner is going to have a unique set of just their schedule and everything happening. So feel free to reach out if that is something you're kind of struggling with, either as a parent or as a learner. I'm happy to talk with you. So you guys can reach me. You can go to my website and contact me there, or tfibpodcast@gmail.com. All right, I only have one last kind of fear, but it's a big one. And I hear this a lot from parents, grandparents, you name it. It's that it's too late. My child is too big. My child's not young anymore. So it's, we missed that boat. It's gone. It is never too late. And my episode with Sandra, my good friend who's from Peru, she is this beautiful mom. She has a daughter who she did not speak Spanish to. And she started, I think, when her daughter was 4 or 5, I think close to 5. They started to speak Spanish together. And she has since had a little boy. He's adorable. He's probably quite big now. But there's an episode with Sandra called It's Never Too Late. And it's about how she started with her daughter at that like older toddler age, right? 4 or 5, going into school. Like those are the kind of the rough moments for us, like I've already been speaking 5 years to my child, and now they're going to do the English, which is going to take over, right? So she really went into it with, this amazing confidence and intentionality. And the hardest kind of time for bilingual parents, she just started and she went into it that way. And actually, I really should get her back on the podcast to hear how it's going, because it has been a few years and I would love to just reconnect with her and see. So if you want to hear from Sandra as well, let me know, because I 100% want to know how it's going with her too. I know with her little son, so she started with her daughter before her son was born, and then when her son was born, he was like 100% getting Spanish from her. And then her husband knows some Spanish, but I think that, speaks English mostly, so they're kind of in that bilingual environment. So I will 100% reach out and try to get Sandra back on so she can update us. Um, but yes, she's an amazing example. She's one of many. If you are in this boat and would love to share your story, please reach out, because I think these are the most inspiring stories to hear. It's great to hear someone who's like, I always spoke French to my kid and now they're bilingual. Okay, great. There's many children, right? Like who grew up with, I grew up speaking Chinese and English and I'm bilingual. Like, look, okay, that's great. That's a beautiful story. But I think many of us need to hear that it was really hard. We started late, and, the challenging story is usually the more inspiring story. So I would love to hear if you know someone or are someone, or maybe even when you were a child, did you grow up bilingual and your parents started late, or how did that happen? I would love to hear that story, and I think our listeners would too. There is a benefit if your child is older, or even my children now being older, is they can tell you, they have this autonomy to tell you, like, what are they interested in? What works for them? If they don't like something, I mean, yeah, that's a little bit trickier, right? Versus a baby, you're talking to a baby, they don't really have any say. And you can just keep talking about whatever you want to talk about. And that's all fun, but it gets boring, right? So with an older kid, it's really interactive. They can tell you all sorts of things. And I mean, it's hard to change the language if you've been speaking with your child for X number of years, but is it impossible? No, 100% doable, right? And if you kind of explain to them why it's important, you make it fun, you follow their lead and do what they're interested in, right? Allow them, if there's some show they want to watch, you like, make it really enjoyable for them. There's games, there's all sorts of ways that you can make it an enjoyable thing and not like this thing you're forcing upon them. Okay, so what do you need if you want to raise a bilingual child, or if you want to learn a language that you haven't, a brand new language or a language you want to get back to, like myself, I was learning Arabic and stopped and came back to it. What do you need? You need four things. You need a plan. Okay, if you're going to raise children, there are many different plans, different, ways to set up your time, as I mentioned. I have a post about that, and I can link to it because there are multiple ways to do it. There's no one way fits all. If you're going to be learning a language, you should have a plan. It's not just going to happen if you don't, create a time for yourself to study each week or each day. So take it seriously, make a plan, put it into your routine, schedule something. You need to have some strategies and resources, right? So again, that's kind of like having the teacher or having a book or finding a website or like a YouTube channel that you really like. And then you have the resource. How am I going to use it? Right? Is it enough for me to just watch the easy Arabic video, or do I need to do something with it afterward? Right? So if you're not really sure about this, because you've just never gone about it, or you're not a teacher, or whatever the reason, you can feel free to reach out to me and I will try to help you if you have questions. But I think, having the resource is the first hurdle. And then like, well, what do I do with this resource, right? How do I make the most of it? Because yeah, it's great. Show your kid a show, but like, is that enough to just plop them in front of the TV and like, oh, they're going to be bilingual. They're watching Japanese cartoons. Maybe, maybe not, right? Like we need interaction. As I said, this is the most important thing for languages. Human face to face or Zoom to Zoom, whatever you can do, right? But face to face interaction with an actual human is going to be so much more rich and like it's going to be more sticky in their brain. So if you're watching a show with them, like talk to them about it afterward or ask them what do they think is going to happen, or like make a game with the vocab that they're learning. Do whatever you can do, right? It's like think about how to engage with the resource, engage with your child, engage with the language. I think that is such an important part of that's missing if people just kind of have the resource and watch the thing and then it's done, right? As a teacher, working with students, especially very beginner students, but any level student, we always think about like, here's the resource in the middle. I need a pre-activity, whether that's just going to highlight some vocab or get them like a discussion topic to think about the thing that I'm going to show them a video about. Then we actually watch, say, the video or listen to the song or we do whatever the lesson, right? The core kind of lesson. And then there's a post activity. So like you need to balance pre and post with something because the thing itself is great, but you need to engage with it more. You can't just like see it and goodbye, right? It's the engagement that happens before and after. The engagement before to kind of activate your brain, the engagement after to like revisit those terms, right? Revisit the topics, get their opinion, right? If it's a higher level student or a child who can talk, right? Get them talking, have them talk to you about it. You need the third thing, getting on a tangent. So you need a plan. You need some resources and strategies of how to use them. You need support. Yes, those people who are islands teaching, their language all by themselves, you're going to need support. And, it doesn't have to be someone who's, speaking the same language to their children, but support of a community doing the same thing. We all need community. We all need to know that somebody else is doing what we're doing. That is literally the reason why I started this podcast in 2019, which is so long ago. It kind of blows my mind. But the fact that I know there's other parents raising their kids with another language scattered across the US and scattered across the globe. And I wanted a place to, kind of get everybody invited. And like, here's this place of people who are doing the same thing as me because I was, the non-native parent and it was scary. And I had all of these fears, hence why I can list them all because I've felt them at a core level of myself. And in order to not like get lost in them, you need the support, right? You need the other people who are like, you can do this, we're doing this. And seeing other people who have older kids when you're at the beginning even myself watching parents who have teens, right? And I have toddlers, it's just, I think that is so, so important. We cannot underestimate the value of having a community of like-minded people. And I hope that this community can be that for some of you. So please reach out. I'm here via email, via my website. I would love to hear from you guys, especially if you're struggling. Reach out. That's what we're here for. And the last, most important thing to be on this journey, right? If it's learning a language, if it's teaching your child, is you need to have commitment and perseverance. Nice big words there, but that means you cannot give up, right? It is going to be difficult. It's going to be challenging. Some people are going to push your buttons. Those people might be your two little children. Not speaking from experience here, but you need to know why you're doing it and then to stay committed to that goal, right? Like, and even your goal may change, right? Your goal might be, I want my kids to, speak and write and do everything fluently. And then you might scale back. Like, it's okay if they can't write. Or vice versa. Maybe you just want them to speak to grandma and grandpa, and then you get much more invested in like, no, I really want them to like study the language and the writing and the grammar and the calligraphy and whatever else, is involved. So that goal may change, but staying committed to the decision that you've decided, right? For your family, for your kids, right? We're doing this for their betterment. We're not doing this to punish them or anything like that, right? This is for them to have this beautiful opening of their spirits. We've already talked about all of the benefits of bilingualism. If you're not sure of them, there is an episode on that as well from the Way archives, but it's back there. All right, quick tips of advice before we end is to start small. As I mentioned, it might just be like an hour, half an hour at breakfast. You start using the language and getting more comfortable every day, adding more time in. Focus on useful vocab. I mentioned this earlier as well, of like if you're drinking out of glasses and eating off of plates every day, you need to teach yourself and the kids those words, right? That is part of your everyday vocabulary. If you take the subway or if you drive a car, right? These are the words that you need. So focus your vocab studies, right? Focus your attention because a language is very vast and completely immersive and you can drown. So be focused, right? So look at high frequency words as well. Those are the words that people use, like it's like 20% of the words of a language that we use 80% of the time, right? So all these words we say all the time. The, you know, in, on, at, all those like little small words that are very important, right? Those are words you need to know. So again, start small, focus on that really useful, important vocab for your day-to-day life. Focus on topics that interest you or interest your child because this, language learning, teaching someone a language, it will get, a little bit tedious if it's not interesting. If I'm trying to teach my kids Shakespeare, they might lose interest pretty quickly, right? Versus if I'm teaching them how to play a game, or explaining something about, soccer for my son. It's going to be much more engaging and interesting. You can try to use some, structure to your week. For example, I have like a weekly theme where each day has like a focus. And I will share that as well. The episode I think is called Spice Up Your Learning or something. But yeah, it's like every day is a different focus, or you can do a weekly theme. So there's different like 4 themes a month. Anyway, you can find ways to organize your learning. This is whether it's with your kids or with yourself learning, right? Find a way to kind of keep yourself going. My friend Elle from Speaking Tongue podcast has like a daily thing where every month she publishes the calendar and every day of the month has a different kind of prompt. So like learn the word for light switch or learn the word, talk about a time you did XYZ. So she's really great about that. I would suggest use music because music is this international language, first of all, and it makes us feel very, happy or calm depending on the type of music, but also there's so much we can learn and so much, as I mentioned, the repetition of music is just amazing. Kids respond so well. I used to teach a group for babies to 4-year-olds with music. So I was teaching French and Spanish to them through music, through songs, through lullabies. And I mean, part of that was teaching their adults these songs so they could sing them with them and kind of expose them to these other languages from the earliest ages possible, which was a beautiful thing. But yes, music is very powerful. You definitely need to speak. If you are learning a language, if you are hoping to teach your child a language, you have to speak. It's amazing how many students I've had in my like 16, 17 years of teaching are like, I'll just listen. And I'm like, no, you're learning a language. Like you have to talk in class. You can't just listen to me and listen to the other students. Like I need you to practice. So, theoretical stuff is great, but when it's language learning, it has to be very practical and you have to speak, right? Especially if you want your kids exposed to this language, right? You can't just like point them to other resources. Like you need to be a resource yourself, even if it's not perfect. Reading is also an amazing resource if you are able to read in the language, right? And that can be trickier than others if you're learning Chinese, for example, but as much as you can, read, read, consume as much as you can. And as a learner, as a parent, read out loud. I mean, it's a completely different skill. Anyone who, has had to read or give a speech or something, right? Reading your head is one thing. Reading out loud is a completely different thing. So, my kids are at the age right now where they're both learning to read. My son reads pretty well. My daughter is learning. And I need patience to like let her stumble and sound things out and help her when needed. But she's a pretty tough gal and she tells me when she wants to do it herself. But it's a skill and it's an amazing skill to have and to practice and to instill in our children this love of reading. I myself learning to read Arabic, it's very messy, very messy, worse than my 5-year-old reading English. And it's such a good skill. Like I see it being so hard for me, and I know that I need to do it more, right? So this is something like I can intentionally put on my schedule to try to practice, right? I need to intentionally book my lessons with my tutor, right? I'm giving myself as an example to show you like this is something we all struggle with, right? Like it doesn't matter how many years of teaching and learning languages, like we all have to organize our time. We all have to take my advice, right? I'm saying this advice for myself. I'm not saying it for you guys and being preachy and trying to tell you I know everything. It's just these are things I tell myself and I note down for myself because we all need reminders. The last little note I had here was about watching TV. And yeah, I'm not a huge screen person, I'm not a huge TV person, but I did find watching TV when I was learning Polish was so helpful. I mean, I learned different expressions. I learned a lot about culture from, just the things like that would happen in a TV show or a movie, the cultural norms, the different accents, the different voices. It's amazing. If you take a class, right? Let's say my students who are learning English, they take a class with me and they hear my voice only, right? Same with my high school students. They really only heard me speaking, French or Spanish. That's only one voice of millions of people who speak this language. Like you need exposure. Your kids need exposure to all sorts of voices, all sorts of accents, right? All sorts of people and topics. Yeah, so TV is very rich for that. And it's a very like accessible thing that many of us have access to. I often will ask my students, like, did you watch TV? Like, yes, in English. And they'll be like, yes. And I'm like, good, good. That is so good for you, right? Like, you may feel like you are just sitting on the couch, eating your popcorn, relaxing. But if you are being intentional, doing it in another language, if you are giving that to your kids in another language, it's a huge win, right? And it's that nice barrier between like enjoyable and also studious. So yeah, TV, movies, YouTube, like I can put, lots of things into this category. But yeah, basically any videos that you can watch that are like authentic, it's amazing. So lots of little pieces of advice here. But lastly, you really just want to think about the contact that you or your child is having with the language, right? So, I mean, we can put this in like very real terms, like how many hours in every day are they actually hearing the language? How many hours are they actually speaking, right? Like, I know for my kids being in school all day in English, right? We're speaking English at the house, like, there's a lot of English. So, you need to be very realistic of like, are they only hearing 10% of their day in Polish? Like, that's very little, right? So, kids and adults, right? Anyone learning a language, we need a real reason to speak this language because if it's not needed, why am I going to make the effort? Okay, so either we need to create that, we need to give them, right? My kids go to Polish school Saturdays, so they have this very real need to use the language there. They have a very real need with their father, with his family. So thinking creatively, if you don't have a natural need, how am I going to create this need? And then how am I going to consistently give them exposure? Because consistent exposure, right? There's a point where your brain gets tired and maybe you need a break, but then like you got to come back every day, right? Like nobody runs a marathon without training. Nobody speaks a language fluently without practicing and doing it and being exposed to it, right? It doesn't just happen naturally. So if you can, especially for your kids, get them into, some sort of contact with other kids the same age who speak the same language. I think that just is an amazing thing. It's an amazing gift if you have it, right? It's not a necessary thing to have, but it will do wonders because mom and dad, we're great, but like we're not that exciting, right? Some best friends, kids the same age, much more exciting. And if you are able, another amazing thing to do is, travel to a country where that language is spoken. Again, giving them that real exposure, that real, need to speak the language, hearing it from so many people, that, I mean, again, that takes a lot. That does take a lot. And I recognize that that's not in everybody's, you know, wallet. It's not a possibility for all of us. But yes, please, in conclusion, I'm going to wrap up here. Know that you can teach your child any language if you are really motivated and willing to, push through and be persistent and persevere through the hard times, you can do it. If you're trying to learn a language, same thing, right? There is no like nothing that's going to limit you if you want to do it. The hardest language in the world, you can learn it, right? If you are strategic and you stay at it and you keep trying. And you just need to start where you are, right? Whether that's, with a kid who's 6 who you've never spoken to in Icelandic, and now you want to speak Icelandic to them. Great. Today's the day they're 6, right? Do it little by little, right? You will improve. They will pick up more, right? And just to not let any fear of being like, not enough, not knowing enough, not perfect enough. Nobody's perfect. Even the native parents, the native speakers, they're not perfect. So do your best. And again, look for support because we all need it, right? When we have those tough times. So you're not on your own. There are many of us raising bilingual kids. There are many of us learning a language later in life as an adult, struggling. So, don't get too bogged down by the people who make it look effortless and easy and you can speak Cantonese in 6 weeks and okay, great. The rest of us in reality need a lot more time and a lot more exposure and a lot more practice and a lot more of everything. So don't let any of these things bog you down or, make you afraid. I just hope that you can do a little bit today, right? If that's just 5 minutes on an app to learn the language, great, right? If you let your kids watch a TV show in the language, great, great. That's a win, right? Because every day you're going to build off of the same, build off of that energy and keep going, right? Every day, some exposure. One of my good friends online, she'll say, she also has a podcast, Heidi. It's called Love, Joy, and Languages. She talks about every day, like touching the language. Like I need to have contact with all of my languages, right? She speaks English, but then Italian and German, and she touches each of them every day. Like there's not a day that goes by that she doesn't do something with those languages. And I think that's just a great reminder to all of us that it does not have to be amazing and Instagrammable and 5 hours long. It can be a very short thing that we do, but we're in contact, whether it's listening to a podcast, playing a game for 5 minutes on an app, whatever it is. My kids love Wordle in English and Polish. I mean, that's such a simple, easy thing, right? But they love it. It's so fun. And they're, using their brains and being creative and thinking about the letters. And, everything you can do is good. So I will stop babbling. So happy to be back and, sharing my thoughts with you guys. This episode literally has been in the making for years, years, as I mentioned. So I'm very happy to be able to finally record it and hopefully get it out to you guys soon. And inshallah, we will be back with another episode shortly. All right, so wrapping up because I could keep talking about languages and teaching and learning all day, but I so appreciate you guys for sticking around, listening to this entire episode, for coming back while I was on hiatus. Thank you so much. And if you can, if you enjoyed this episode, share it with somebody, share it on your Instagram. Make sure you tag me so I can, see it and give you some love. And again, please reach out if you are questioning, doubting, fearing, struggling, thinking about, not being sure if you can do this. And I mean, I know I've been in the Facebook groups about bilingual parenting, and many people are questioning their situation for one reason or another. So I know this is a very real thing. And I'm not here to just be like, yeah, it's easy, do it, go ahead. No, like, please contact me. And, inshallah, we can set up a time and talk and help you to really put some concrete plans, on the books, because it's great to have ideas, but you sometimes really need like actionable steps and an actionable plan of like, tomorrow we will do this. And on, Friday, we're going to do this as a family. And Saturday, this is our plan. Like every day, something. Or if you're, learning a language, same thing. Like, what am I going to do? I want to have daily contact with this language. How? And how is it going to, be interesting to me and not be boring, right? Some of us can do the same thing every day. Some of us want more excitement. So I will put links to all the things that I mentioned, inshallah, all the episodes or places to contact me into the description, so you can easily click on them. And I hope to hear from you guys, and I so appreciate you being here. Have a wonderful week, and I will hear you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.